those in our programming here. And so we are joined by three experts who I'll let introduce themselves here in a moment to talk about briefly some of these things we're reading in the news, we're all thinking about, and we're feeling on the ground as water users. So maybe we'll start with Vanessa for a quick introduction and an update.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Trout, and I am the Executive Director and Forestry Program Coordinator for the White River and Douglas Creek Conservation Districts in Rio Blanco County.
Susan Carter, City of Grand Junction Utilities Department. I'm the water conservationist for the city.
I'm Maddie Baker. I am an invasive species specialist for Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Great, thank you. So each of you covers has an expertise in a certain area. Matt, maybe we'll start with you. Mussels. We're reading a lot about mussels. Say more.
Yes. So I think it's safe to say that the folks in this room are aware of mussels equal bad. So I won't take the time belaboring why mussels equal bad. And if you need me to explain that to you, please come see me at my table. I just want to talk. So with that said, 2025 has been a really interesting year. We've uncovered a lot of pieces of the puzzle. And most of them, if not all of them, are very relevant to this area in the Colorado River. Starting with the finding on July 3rd, 2025, on a privately owned body of water in Eagle County. I went out there for some regularly scheduled surveying and discovered a very mature population of zebra mussels in this body of water. Please do not waste any valuable Q&A time asking me where it is or who owns it. I will not tell you. With that being said, the property owner has been collaborative with us and has allowed us to apply the same EPA-registered molluscicide that we use at Highline Lake to attempt eradicating zebra mussels there. This is called EarthTech QZ and is a copper sulfate chemical. With that, don't ask me if I know that it was successful. It will take several years of ongoing sampling for us to truly know whether or not we have gotten rid of all of the mussels in that body of water particularly. The good news is that we were able to apply during the summer where the water temperature is high. The zebra mussels are very metabolically active, which means that they were taking in that chemical at a much greater rate than they had been at somewhere like Highline, where we were doing treatments during the fall and winter time outside of irrigation season. So we have seen a decent die-off. That makes us happy, but it will take years of surveying to truly know whether or not it was effective and whether we may or may not need to retreat. It is worth mentioning that this body of water was connected to the Colorado River and is no longer connected to the Colorado River. So we were able to isolate it before we performed a chemical application. It is very important to our agency not to impact any threatened and endangered native species during these processes. So we will make very certain that everything is isolated before we are applying. And of course, the fun doesn't end there, now does it? On Monday, September 8th, we had a sample that was confirmed by our Aquatic Animal Health Lab in Brush as positive for zebra mussels in what we call East and West Lakes, which are located at the State Wildlife Section of the James M. Robb Colorado River State Park. That's a mouthful. That is off of D Road for those who are familiar with Grand Junction. So right in the heart of town, it is filled by a canal system and goes out directly into the Colorado River. I myself have been out there and can confirm that there are quite a few adult zebra mussels there. That being said, this body of water is owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. There is no surface water recreation allowed there, so we are optimistic that recreation has not been and will not be a factor for spread with this particular location. Fishing is permitted, not wading, no use of watercraft or anything like that. Nobody should be touching the water. So we know with relative confidence that the reason there are mussels in this body of water is just from the natural flow of the water in the hydrological system since they have been introduced to the Colorado River. So where does this leave us? We are now up to 5 infested bodies of water here in Colorado. In order of discovery, Highline Lake in 2022, Mesa Lake, which is on Highline Lake State Park, the Colorado River, this privately owned body of water in Eagle County, and then East and West Lakes, which are really one lake, but for some reason are named separately. We've also found zebra mussel veligers, which are the microscopic juveniles, at several other locations in the Colorado River and in the Grand Valley Water Users Association canals and infrastructure all throughout the valley. What does it all mean? The good news is that these mussels were likely not transported by recreation. They are present in the Colorado River, and they are going where the water flows within the system that feeds off of the Colorado River. The bad news, this is a very expansive system. It is not something that we can simply drain. It is not something that we can throw a bunch of chemicals at. This is something that we are going to have to find a way to live alongside and to manage and mow the proverbial grass so that our pipes do not get clogged. Silver lining, a lot of you folks in this crowd get to be my friend for a long time. I'm looking at you, irrigators. So, in this room of water professionals and advocates, we need to be united front against this. This is a very important puzzle piece in the conversation of everyone getting the water that they need, and this makes it a very locally important issue. I was asked by a member of the media recently when we're just going to give up, and my retort to that is whenever we don't need water to survive anymore. That is when we are going to give up this fight. So, ultimately, we're going to continue working with our partner agencies, whether it's the folks that are fighting the fires, using the waters from our lakes, making sure that they're all in line with protocols and they're not dumping planes full of mussels all over Colorado. We will continue working with our friends that are surveying for fish, water quality on the Colorado River, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All of our partners are all extremely important parts of this conversation. Back in the day when we thought mussels were only present at Highline Lake State Park, that was one thing, but now we're talking about the Colorado River, so we will be making these decisions with consideration for recreational opportunity, for infrastructure protection, and ultimately for our resource protection of our water and making sure that we can continue to get that where it needs to go. So, thanks all. I did have to write out a script for this because I can become very long-winded when it comes to my favorite topic of mussels. So if you would like to learn more, if you'd like to dive in, if you'd like to tell me somewhere that you think we need to be sampling, that we aren't sampling, I am open to all of it. I am not open to questions about ducks. They are not transporting mussels, I promise. So anything else, feel free to ask away. But that's all I've got.
Thank you for that, Maddie, and good to know about the ducks. I appreciate that. Susan, responsible water use has certainly come into focus for municipalities all over the state. Can you tell us about what's going on in the city of Grand Junction?
Sure. I'm going to start a little bit about where our water comes from, and ours all comes from 100% snowmelt. Doesn't touch the river. It comes down the Kenneck Creek watershed, is stored in the Purdy and Juniata reservoirs. Typically, we store about a year's worth of water in those reservoirs. We started out a little low this year at about 75%. So, and we had done a study several years ago that identified that if we didn't do something, that by 2039, which really isn't that far away, we would have to build a new water plant and use another source of water, which would probably be the Gunnison River. Much different water quality than, of course, the snowmelt coming off of the Grand Mesa. By the way, did you know that we are the best water in the United States, voted by the AWWA 3 years ago? So we're proud of that. So anyway, from this to a regional water efficiency plan was developed with our partners, and it also identified my position, water conservationist with the city. So I started 2 years ago, and actually almost exactly 2 years ago. And since then, we've developed quite a few programs. Before I started, the city had installed AMI meters. So our meters actually have Wi-Fi on them, so we can actually see water use within an hour of people using. This allowed us to actually develop better leak standards and to notify people of leaks. This has been a huge water savings because before you would have to wait until you got your next bill. So it was typically at least 30 days before you knew that, like, hey, I might have had a leak for 30 days. So, you know, you can imagine that that leak could have added up to thousands of gallons. So anyway, our leak detection module went into effect in April of 24, and between them and between there and July, the numbers I have is we have saved 7.6 million gallons of water through leak detection. Normally, people are notified within 2 days, and normally it takes them at least 2 days to fix it. So we have a young man that charts all this, and I work a lot with them. Sometimes some of these things come to me because it's, well, what is leaking? What is the problem? And so we developed a water efficient rebate, and of that I have some indoor things like toilets, washing machines, and dishwashers, and then outdoors we have a lot of smart irrigation components. So toilets are actually the number one leaker in the house. They can leak quite a bit. They've been one of my most popular water efficiency rebates, followed by smart controllers, rotor nozzles, and what am I missing? Anyway, smart drip conversions, which ties into our lawn replacement program. And so, yes, Greg, if Greg's still in the room for you, we do lawn replacement, our turf conversion in the city of Grand Junction. There's 17 complete so far. 2 of them were in parks. The rest of them have been residential. So far, those conversions have saved 148,000 gallons. Lawn conversion going from high water to low water plants. You see the full savings within 3 years. So we're just starting to see those savings. Those savings are going to increase as time goes on. And we work with those people too in doing smart irrigation audits or assessments. We say assessments because audit can be a scary thing. And most people just don't know how to water, right? We've moved here, a lot of us from other places, or don't realize that, hey, clay holds water. We don't need to water every day. And so that's been a really big program. Last year, I focused on commercial, industrial, institutional, and with working, I think I did 10 different audits, saved 2.6 million gallons through working with large properties. And then this year we hired a CMU intern. So we have a student from here that's doing audits. He's seeing about 3,000 to 15,000 gallons per property that he does in savings. And of course, this is going to increase because people are just learning now. So they'll have that information for next year. We did Garden in the Box this year for the first time. This is a program through Resource Central on the Front Range. It averages about, roughly 400 gallons per garden that's installed. They're pre-designed gardens. I actually got Ute Water and Clifton Water to partner with us on this program. So it was a valley-wide program. And we saved roughly about 85,000 gallons through that program. And so that's a really good thing for us across the whole valley. Other things, let me see here. And then we have DRIP, the Drought Response Information Project, and that's a collaboration of Ute Water, Clifton Water, City Water, OMID of the Orchard Mesa Irrigation District, and then some other partners like CSU Extension, NOAA. But we've been pushing out drought information and did you know you should only be watering once a month, right? Or excuse me, once a week right now for the month of October. And so we push out information like that, as well as we do site visits and presentation for education. But overall, we are seeing that decrease in watering. So now we think we have pushed out that need for a new water plant to 2055.
Thank you. Yeah, some impressive activity by the City of Grand Junction. Nicely done. And for all of us who live in Western Colorado, we have certainly felt the impact this summer. Vanessa, can you say more about what's happening and remediation or otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say thank you to the Colorado River District for giving the county, Rio Blanco County, an opportunity to present to you what's been going on with the wildfires. Show of hands, has everybody heard about the Elk and Lee fire in Rio Blanco County? Yeah, it's been covered in the news. Did we all know that it was the 5th largest fire in Colorado? There are, I'll just give you some stats just to kind of put things in perspective, and I have some slides as well. But over 3 weeks, both the Elk and Lee fires burned 150 acres. We had over 40 states of hotshot crews and fire crews come to Rio Blanco County. So it was a total of, I think, around 1,200 firefighters. So just shout out to those guys for keeping us safe and keeping the fire out of Meeker. That was huge. I do have some slides. I don't know if we have those up. Okay. No, that is not my slide.
They're yours.
That's me. Okay. No. There we go. Back one. Back one more.
I apologize. I didn't give you this here.
Oh.
This is backwards. This is forwards.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to be commanding you guys to do that. Okay, so putting things into perspective, this is just an image of the different counties that surround Rio Blanco County. You can see where the Lee fire is in relation to the Piceance Creek Basin and the Elk fire in relation to the White River Basin. Just some stats there. The Lee was 137,000 acres approximately, and the Lee fire, or the Elk fire rather, was about 14,000. Next slide. Oh, I guess I can do that. Okay. This was just an image to give you an idea of where that is in relation to the green and the white and the Yampa and the Colorado. You can see where the Lee fire, again in the Piceance Basin, and then the Elk fire very close to North Fork and South Fork, both along the White River. This is a map from the BLM. They just recently completed their BEAR assessment, and BEAR stands for Burned Area Emergency Report. And this just gives you more of kind of an official perimeter of where the fires were. You can see how they overlay different streams, and especially the White River. I really like this report, or this data that the USGS collected, and this was after looking at the shape and form of each fire and burn severity, soil, rainfall data, and what it does is predict the flow, risk, and volume of sediment. And so you can see at the legend, I don't know if you can see the legend on the bottom, but the red is the highest risk or hazard of debris flow. And this is the Elk fire, and you can see that the entire thing is pretty much in red. In addition, the squiggly lines are the streams, and those, again, are the darkest blue, which are representing a huge part of runoff. You can see Lake Avery, it was drained this year. There was not water in there when the fires happened. Along the southern kind of perimeter north going, I guess, west, that is all along the White River. And you can see the darker red, more of the brown colors, are all along County Road 8. And they have been experiencing some very severe debris flows and sediment across County Road 8 there. I did put up just a little bit of kind of 101 about fires, not knowing if everybody kind of knew what happens after a wildfire. It's kind of like the balloon analogy, right? If you have a balloon and push on one side, the other side is going to react. So what happens after wildfire is, you get your vegetation loss, and then the soil goes through something called, it becomes hydrophobic, right? The soil is afraid of the water. And so what happens when it rains is all of that water is running off of that soil, and that's where it picks up debris, and carries with it ash, heavy metals, and runs into the roads and other landscapes. Lots of flooding, and we're seeing that now, right? So we've gone from incident now into recovery, and this is a huge part of the recovery. This is the Lee fire. Again, just kind of explaining how vegetation burns and how that water carries with it debris into all the different sort of channels and streams, and especially the White River, affecting everything from aquatic species because they don't have oxygen in the water to breathe, and also wildlife as well. The biggest thing is the risk to people and infrastructures, which we are experiencing now. The county and the districts and the SACORs have come together to form a recovery team, and that is what we're doing is putting out surveys, an agricultural natural resource survey. We have drop-in community meetings. We're giving people an opportunity to come to the districts, to come to the county, and tell us what their resource needs are, what is happening on their land. And that is giving us the ability to connect them to programs and also grants. And so we are in the process now of assessing all of that need, figuring out these grants, figuring out the programs, and also our collaborative partners that are going to help us with that massive lift. I think that's the end of mine. Oh, here we go. This is just a snapshot sort of what the districts have been doing, and again, we're not doing this alone. We have incredible partners, the county, our board members, Colorado River districts, and other stakeholders that are involved. The districts have become a sponsor with the NRCS Emergency Watershed Protection Program, and what that is, it's a program that protects infrastructure, public safety from the risk of impacts from debris and flooding. And so we've entered into an agreement with them. Those are exigent projects, meaning there's probably 7 landowners that need immediate help. So we're in the process of being able to deliver that, and hopefully those projects will be completed by November 24th. Ditch cleaning, this is something that the landowners have identified as a huge issue right now. As you can imagine, all the sediment going into the irrigation ditches and how you're going to get that out. I mean, we're talking massive loads of sediment and debris and trees, and you can't obviously get water through there with all that sediment in there. So ditch cleaning is a big one that they've identified, and we've successfully been granted an award from the Yampa Valley Community Foundation to help those landowners with some funding for that. Diversion infrastructure repairs, this is something that we're working on with the help of the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable and an opportunity with the Water Supply Reserve Fund grant through the CWCB. And that will help with different measuring devices, pumps, things that have been destroyed or burned during a fire, and then another part of that would be sort of those larger repairs, infrastructure, diversion, etc. Reseeding, as you imagine, that could be, that's a huge part of recovery efforts on public and private lands, and so we've applied for grants from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation to help us extend those resources in reseeding to private landscapes. This is something that is not really part of the recovery efforts from the fire, but it is happening with the forest health program within the districts. I'm happy to say that we just received a grant from the Community Wildfire Defense Grant, which ties into, if anybody's familiar with your Community Wildfire Protection Plan, it ties into funding projects that were identified in that plan. And so we were just awarded $500,000, and that will all go to fuels mitigation, site assessments, and recovery efforts up in the eastern part of Rio Blanco County. So we're super excited about that. And I think that was my last slide.
Okay.
Just trying to think if I had anything else.
In kind of maybe 1 or 2 sentences, where could people find out more about each of your respective topics? Maybe we'll start with you, Vanessa.
Several different places. You can go to the district's website, whiterivercd@gmail.com, or huge dedicated towards wildfire recovery resources, as with the districts. Our local stock growers, they are a huge source of information, BLM. You can reach out to them.
Great, thank you. Susan, how about you for Grand Junction?
So the city website, under utilities, we have a water conservation page, and actually I have several pages under that with the different programs and all their details.
Thank you. Maddie?
I would suggest Colorado Parks and Wildlife's website. If you Google CPWANS for aquatic nuisance species, you might even see a picture of me, but that will take you to the best source.
Awesome. Can we get a quick round of applause for our experts here? Thank you all. We're out of time for what was planning to be a Q&A session, but I'm confident that each of you would be happy to take some questions. I'll volunteer you for that in our break and after the event. So thank you very much for coming. And to keep things moving, we'll move right into our next section, and I'd like to introduce my colleague, Melissa Wills, who is our Community Funding Partnership Program Manager, to talk a little bit more about this impactful program, grant program, and more, and a short film. Welcome, Melissa.
Okay, switch. Okay, my coworker just told me that he would like me to lead a round of the Hokey Pokey. So, no, I'm joking. But real talk, let's all stand up for a second. Let's do some light stretching. I'm going to lead a yoga session. Yes. Hands to the sky, reach to the ceiling. Oh, feel the blood in the legs. Don't stand up too fast. We got to be safe here. Yes. Okay, but stay standing. This was actually a real engagement opportunity. You thought the polling was engagement. This is different. Okay. Please sit down if you have, and it's okay, never heard of the Community Funding Partnership Program. It's okay. You can sit down. If you're like, what is she talking about? Thank you for being here. Okay. Please sit down if you know of a grantee who has received a grant from the Colorado River District through the Community Funding Partnership, but you are not a grantee, but you are aware of them. You have met them. Okay? Please sit down if you indeed were a grantee of the Community Funding Partnership in the last 5 years. Yes, yes, yes. I'm actually seeing some faces here. Okay. Okay, please sit down if you're still standing. Okay. That was my way of just, gosh, this light is like blinded by the light. Anyways, hi, I am Melissa Wills. I operate the Community Funding Partnership. It is the flagship grant program for the Colorado River District. I am here to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, because I saw some of you sit down when I said Community Funding Partnership, what is it? And then I'm also going to give a little update, and I have a surprise at the end, so get ready. Okay, so let's style in the slides. Oh, my name is just, well, I'm Melissa, so you can remember that. I think I clicked the green button. Okay, so 5 years ago, in 2020, we went to the ballot and passed a ballot initiative that created the Community Funding Partnership. As Andy said earlier this morning, we had over 72% support across 15 counties. Now, I bring this up again because this hasn't changed and it's actually increased, and that this support is evident in the work that we do every single day. Now, when we created the program, we built it so that it would be accessible. And today we've provided grants as small as $6,000 to $1 million. We look for projects that are community driven, that are built on collaboration, that have multiple purposes, multiple benefits, and of course, they are a catalyst for state, local, and federal funding. We provide about $4.2 million out annually across our 15 counties. And so this is not a lot when it comes to a water project, but it certainly pays the bills when it comes to bringing other funding to the ground. Now again, when we built this program, the idea is we wanted to build a grant program that every single water user in our district could see themselves in. projects that have at least two of these benefits here: productive ag, conservation and efficiency, infrastructure, watershed health, water quality, and healthy rivers. In the past 5 years, we have responded to the needs of our communities in many different ways, and that includes creating programs that fit the needs. So we have our general grants, which I've talked about, multiple benefits, community-driven. We also have emergency grants. These are grants that happen after the fact of an emergency that help recoup the costs of a ditch being blown out, of a fire taking out a landscape, etc. And we have accelerator grants. These are grants that provide funding for grant writing, feasibility studies, engineering and design, so that one can apply for a state or a federal grant. We created this program in 2022 when federal funding came online in a once-in-a-generation amount. And we knew that we needed to provide grants so that the Western Slope could access this funding. Now, honestly, it was a bit of a risk, but it turned out to have impact. We found that every dollar that we invested into this program, we had a federal return of about $64 on average. That's a lot. Now, I realize the federal landscape is a bit different now, and that's okay. We've opened this program so that grantees can use our funds for grant writing, feasibility studies, engineering, all of that, so that they can apply for state grants as well. It's just as important. So I've given you the landscape of our program and how it's built, but I want to make sure to cover what have we seen in the past 5 years. Well, we've seen that there's 3 pressures that our grantees face daily. First of all, aging infrastructure. Most of our infrastructure is over a century old, but has the same demand that it once did. At the same time, we have a hotter and drier climate. We have less water, we have worse water quality, the list goes on. Now, on top of this, we do not have the financial or the institutional capacity here on the Western Slope to tackle these issues to the depth that they deserve. And so with all of these, I got you, Hunter. Just throw that 5 minutes away, it'd be great. With all of these, we have persevered. In our projects, we've seen 3 themes that get projects to the finish line. First one, they have a diversity of thought at the table. They have a variety of perspectives. Most of the projects start from the bottom up, in that they start at a coffee shop, they start in a barn with a cup of coffee, or maybe something a little bit more interesting, thinking of what do we do from here. And what they're brainstorming is out of the box thinking. They're not looking at what have we done in the past and repeating that. They're looking at what can we change and what can we innovate. And so, okay, I could talk for hours and say we do quote-unquote projects. Matt Abusi is always telling me, okay, you need to just stop saying projects, because what does that mean? So I threw up some photos here for the visual people. In the past 5 years, we have lined and piped ditches to improve efficiency. We have upgraded reservoirs that towns and irrigators rely on for water sources. We have restored rivers to help them adapt to a new hydrologic condition. We have invested thousands of dollars into engineering, into planning ahead. And we're also looking into the future. We've invested into research of our irrigation practices, trying to understand how soil moisture impacts our snowpack to our stream flow connection. And of course, as Andy mentioned earlier, looking at the impacts of algal blooms in our reservoirs and their connection to this hotter and drier reality. Now, I could talk all day about water and projects, but it would be important to note that each project impacts people. And so here are some representatives of this. We support projects that help provide drinking water for underserved communities. We support communities in tearing out non-essential turf and putting in Colorado water-wise landscaping. And of course, we have a team here in the middle photo that's restoring a bank, tearing out tamarisk, putting in willows. And We have a classic representative of our agricultural community relying on very, very aging old infrastructure here. So where are we today? We have granted over $32 million to 140 projects, and we've leveraged $98 million. This is $98 million of local, state, federal funding that's here on the ground in the western slope. And that's the difference we're looking for. Okay, so I've said at least 17 times, like over the past 5 years. So, curveball, we're going to talk about the next 5 years, and you're going to help me out with that. So, I would love, oh, wait, never mind. I would love, I'm supposed to have a poll here, but I don't know. Curve. Are we skipping the poll? We have a poll. So, no, let's skip this. Okay, I told you, this is where the video goes. I told you that a video is coming. I didn't tell you it was a video, it was a surprise, so now it's a video, surprise. We created this video, if you guys want to tee it up, to depict why we do what we do. And to really try to drive home the trust that we've built within the 15 counties that we have, and ultimately the impact that we're looking for. So sit down, you already are sitting down, get comfy, we'll dim the lights, and hopefully we'll get this video going, or I can just stall with some jokes. Okay. Yes.
They always call it fighting the river. You know, my granddad spent, I have no idea how many hours and how many dollars, like I say, fighting the river, trying to make it flow where he and the neighbors felt like it should flow. And you can look up and down this valley and you can see that over time it's migrated back and forth for thousands of years. You know, in the small amount of time that we're here, we're not going to change that a whole lot. Primitive of method of irrigating as you can get. Any water that goes down here, I've got it in pipe down there. Working with my son, there's a lot of things that you do on a daily basis that you can remember doing that same exact thing with your dad or granddad when, you know, whether you were his age or even younger. We're operating on some systems. Our diversion system up there is nearly 100 years old. You know, without maintenance throughout the years, that would have probably fallen apart 40, 50 years ago. We've got some structures that, you know, are going to need serious repair in the next 5 to 10 years. Are you better off just replacing it as it is, exactly the way it is, or put in an improved system that's more efficient, more accurate? I think it's an obvious answer is you're better off with the more efficient.
So where'd you steal a stop sign?
Well, where I got that, it's been around a long time. It's custom too, it's got a handle on it. It just happened to be the culvert and the stop sign are about the same size.
Al and Clay have this responsibility. Their heritage is rooted in the stewardship of this same plot of land. The Colorado River District's main goal is protecting the key water source that communities rely on. We have aging infrastructure that needs to be replaced, and we are facing a hotter and drier climate that's making it more and more difficult to access and use water the way we used to.
There's been a lot of improvements through the years on ways of diverting water out of a stream and ways of measuring it and regulating it. You know, we get a few years like this, it becomes a lot more apparent how much of a need.
The gift of CFP is that we use the Colorado River District's existing connections and trust throughout our 15 counties to not only identify what are the needs, what are the projects that
just a livelihood for us. That river makes up this valley. You know, that's why this valley is what it is because there's a river there.
Thank you for clapping. I told the Campbells that they should zoom into this just in case we clap for them. So, yes, I am now a master flood irrigator. If you're wondering, stop signs are useful. No, in all seriousness, as I pull up my PowerPoint one last time, we are here for you. We would love projects. Give me a call. You can visit our website and schedule a meeting with me pretty easily. And we would just, again, we are here for you and want more projects and want to continue these next 5 years just as impactful as we've made them in the last 5 years. So thanks again, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, the Community Funding Partnership. If you have water project ideas, call Melissa. She would love to chat with you. And it was a lot of fun making that film. We got to meet the Campbell family in Paonia, an incredible sixth-generation operation, and just a really good reminder of water users in Western Colorado. They're awesome, and we love working for them. So up next, we're going to have one more panel as we kind of round home on the day here about agriculture and alternative forage. So I see my panelists lined up over there. Thank you. Please welcome me on the stage. So as a quick reminder, I'm Matt Abusi. I'm the communications director at the Colorado River District. And I'll be moderating this panel. And the topic is agricultural drought resilience, theory versus practice. So in the theme of our Across Divides theme of the seminar today, this is one of them, theory and practice. Where do they meet? Where do they diverge? And in the Colorado River Basin, drought resilience isn't just an abstract idea. It's central to the future of our farms, our communities, and way of life. Conservation programs like conserved consumptive use programs and crop consumptive use programs and alternative forage trials show real promise for saving water and building resilience. For producers, trying something new can also bring some real risks and real challenges, and we've got some producers on the stage here today to help bring that perspective. Theory and research provide essential insights, but the real measure of resilience is how well those ideas really work on the ground. So that's what we're going to dig into today, and thankfully, because I am not the expert, I am joined by a panel of experts who I would love for them to introduce themselves, and maybe we could start on the far end there. I think you should be on.
Is that on? Troy Waters. I'm a fifth-generation farmer here in Mesa County.
Hannah Home, and I work for American Rivers.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Kmeyer, and I work with the Colorado Department of Agriculture.
Steve Woodis, and I'm not with NRCS anymore. I retired in 2018, but I have a private consulting company after I retired, and a small farmer west of Montrose.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thanks for the introductions, and I'd love to start with some opening perspectives. And Hannah, maybe we'll start with you. You bring some expertise in forage studies, and maybe you can share some of that. And I know you have slides, and I keep forgetting to pass this out. That green button will forward your slides.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all. It's amazing to be here up on the stage with so many people. I am the least expert person on this panel when it comes to agriculture, but I have been involved with a couple of studies that shed a little bit of light on the question that was raised earlier this planning and that we're kind of going to keep going with, which are what are some of the impacts and some of the possibilities of trying to figure out how to save water in agriculture while not causing too much damage, basically keeping agriculture strong. So first study I'll talk about is the Evaluating Conserved Consumptive Use study in the Upper Colorado River Basin, which most people know as Paul's project, referencing Paul Boucher. So this came out of a whole lot of discussion about the potentials and limitations of doing some kind of demand management program in Colorado back pre-COVID. Actually, I think I heard about the first Colorado case of COVID in the last big demand management work group meeting in Denver. So there was a lot of speculation about what would happen to high elevation grass pastures and hay fields if you took water off of them and tried to save water that way. And Paul, who his family has a ranch up there, basically said, well, let's stop speculating and try it out. So in 2020, a number of pieces of ground up there were either partially or fully dried out, had irrigation withdrawal on them. And then this is a massive study with a whole bunch of moving parts, but I have basically one slide for it. Basically, we took water off of the land, either for part of the season or the full season. There were controls that were irrigated normally, and then we watched what happened for a few years in terms of productivity, in terms of water savings, and also some wildlife factors and economically how it worked out for the producers who participated and how they felt about it. So some of the key takeaways there are that, yeah, you can save water if you take water off the land, big surprise. However, the fully fallowed ground that didn't get any water that year, there was about a 90% reduction in the productivity off of those acres. There was only about a 50% reduction in the consumptive use. And that was because there was still some, moisture in the beginning of the year from snowfall. We didn't herbicide everything, so there was still a little bit of growth that happened on that, and then there was evaporation off the soil. So that was an impact in the current year. And then the other thing that was, I think, probably the key takeaway is that we saw that we didn't only have those impacts on productivity and therefore also the producers' bottom lines in that year, that the producers were paid to stop irrigating on certain fields, but the effects persisted for a few years afterwards. So it took a little while for that ground and that forage to recover productivity even after normal irrigation resumed. So that's something to take into account for any program that you operate to pay people to save water. And then another key factor that came out when the economic study was done was that paying producers to not irrigate their land and take that hit on productivity, it worked out with what we were paying. It worked out economically reasonably well for the people that were just growing hay for sale. But the folks that had cow-calf operations and also relied on the hay that they raised to feed their cattle, they actually took a hit. They came out worse from participating in the program than they would have otherwise. And that was partly because 2020 was a pretty bad year. So they really got almost no growth at all on the fields that they weren't irrigating. And then hay prices were really high as well. So the cost that they had for the extra cost to buy that hay to make up for what they lost from their own fields was more than they got paid to participate in the program. So some key things to keep in mind for designing or participating in any program like that. Another thing that we saw, I mentioned that there were the lag effects on how the forage responded to having been cut off with water for a year. There were some fields that bounced back a lot faster than others. So that stimulated the same group of partners, and you can see some of them listed up there, to look into, are there different kinds of forage, different kinds of hay and pasture crops, that's most of what we use Colorado River for on the western slope, and actually are different forage varieties that could handle drought better. Maybe, in an ideal world, they could, produce the same on less water. Or at the very least, is it possible that you could grow things that if you didn't water them for a year, whether that was because the water wasn't there or you were participating in one of those programs, could they bounce back faster? So that spawned this new area of research on some different alternative forages. So you can see them pictured there. Sandfoin is a legume that's kind of a lot like alfalfa, but it's not exactly like alfalfa. It may use less water. It seems to use water a little differently. It greens up a little earlier in the season and goes a little bit more dormant later in the hottest part of the summer. And cattle can graze it without bloating, which is not always the case with alfalfa. Kernza is an intermediate wheatgrass. You can grow it for either grain or forage. And we found out with that, it's pretty hard to establish. Honestly, with all of these crops, the first year we tested them, we mostly grew weeds. And mostly, but the second year onwards, they've been doing a whole lot better. And then Silphium, it's a much smaller scale trial, but that's a sunflower that can be either oilseed or a forage. And apparently, anecdotally, it appears to hate water. So that maybe it's the unicorn plant. I don't know, too early to tell. But anyway, that's what we're looking at. I can do the next slide. So basically what we've learned, first question was, can these crops even grow in our conditions in western Colorado? And a few slip-ups in the beginning notwithstanding, yes, they can. It turns out we had 3 different elevation zones, Fruta, Cortez area, and then up in Grand County. So we can grow them. There seem to be some advantages for operational flexibility. So it seems like they're worth investigating. We're still learning about if they're really more drought resilient than the crops we usually grow. This is a long-term study. We've just gotten our plots established, and now we're kind of drought stressing some of our plots to see how they do. But anyway, there's some promise there. But we also commissioned as part of this an economic study, and one of the key factors in whether this is viable or not is if the producers can sell them, because it's a completely moot point if these plants handle water stress fantastically if the producers can't sell them in the end. So that's a challenge, and there's a steep learning curve as far as just figuring out how to grow these right, when the optimal time is to irrigate them, when it is to harvest them, exactly, what herbicide treatments work best. So they're promising, but it's complicated. So another area of experimentation with drought resiliency I wanted to point out is the Colorado Ag Water Alliance Drought Resiliency Project. And this has been, I forgot to thank on the alternative forage study, thanks to the community funding partnership that we just heard about that helped support that research. And this other grant program that I'm talking about with the Colorado Ag Water Alliance, I know it's been supported through the CWCB and all of the basin roundtables and some private funding also. They give micro grants to producers to test out different drought resiliency strategies. So a whole bunch of things have been tried. There's a few pictures representing the different things there, everything from bale grazing to alternative crops to different irrigation scheduling. There's a picture of Troy's Camelina field there, which you'll probably hear about later. And then also Paul Kemmeyer, one of my other panelists, developed a new device to hook up drip tape to gated pipe. So lots of innovation going on. And this is real grassroots stuff, figuring out. And then there's studies. You can go to that website and you can see the reports on how all the stuff that people tried and how it worked, if it did or not. The thing is, a lot of this stuff doesn't work the first time you try it. So the bottom lines here that I will leave you with is that there's lots of innovation and research happening on ag drought resilience, kind of how we can grow this pie of by sustaining the agriculture that we have with less water. So there's lots of different innovation and research happening to try to figure that out. But to my mind, it's not enough. And every alternative has a learning curve. However, if we make the right investments in science and in technical support, then we can speed up that learning curve. We can make it possible
soil health first, and then everything else seems to come into place like it should. And I think when you fallow ground completely as part of a program to get paid for not using water, you know, that's going to result in increased tillage for the weeds that are in the field, increased chemical application to kill the weeds that are in the field. So I think if there was a program where you said, well, we can definitely cut back on water, and if there's a certain goal on how much water within the valley you want to cut back, just spread it amongst more producers. But focus on that fallow year, not as a year of no growth, but focus on improving the soil health in that field for next year's cash crop. That just makes sense to me. So if you're growing corn this year and you have an opportunity to plant a small grain into that corn, that could be both your cover crop and next year's cash crop, which requires a lot less water. So, you know, just plan it out. I think sometimes what people could take advantage of if they're going to reduce water use in a field is to, if they ever wanted to explore no-till or reduced till, it gives them an opportunity to plant a crop that will help in that process. It might be a lower residue crop that will help in the process of going no-till, low residue crop into a higher residue crop. And I think anything you can do to improve soil health that improves the amount of organic matter in the soil, carbon in the soil, that's going to increase water holding capacity in the soil and water infiltration rates. So long term, I think that's what you'd be shooting for.
Thanks, Steve. Troy, one of the things I appreciate is when we did the prep call for this, you took that Zoom call on camera from the cab of some piece of equipment as you were, I assume you were cutting hay or something, but I appreciate that. And so you bring a lived experience, and I think as a producer, what does this look like in practice, and what when you hear this stuff, what do you think?
It worries me. That'd be the first thing I'd say. I mean, I was going to touch on a few things, but I don't want to keep repeating everything we've been hearing here today, and I think Andy kind of give a fair representation of what us farmers and ranchers are dealing with here on the Western Slope. You know, we live within the means of the river every year. And it really is funny to me that all of a sudden now everybody's concerned about us farmers and how can we deal with drought. And I don't think it's concerned about us. I think it's concerned about the lower basin getting enough water. And that's what concerns me. But, you know, I really think Hannah, I've had a lot of conversations with her. I think she's been listening and asking the right questions. And you're right, market. We can grow lots of things in western Colorado. We got a dry climate. Normally we have water. We can raise lots of things. But I need to stay in business. It don't do good for me to raise a low water consumption crop if I can't sell it. So that's the biggest thing, and I'm getting really tired of people coming up to me and saying, why don't you grow this, why don't you grow that? Okay, where am I going to sell it? I mean, I'm 5th generation. I got 6th generation sitting out there in the audience with me. And 7th at home. You know, I want to stay in business. I want to pass it on. But, you know, I see these things. The biggest thing, and I'd like to touch on, is these CCU programs. I tell you, this last one, what a joke. And I'm going to be flat out honest with you. It didn't conserve water. It actually encouraged farmers in our area to use more water. I don't understand how people that don't understand agriculture can come in here and tell us what we need to be doing. And I'll expound on that good thing is because this program paid on what crop you raised last year. So they went through satellite imagery and they took little pictures and told us what your consumptive use was last year, and the highest usage crop was corn. So what happened? Everybody out in the lower valley figured out, well, if we plant corn this year. We'll get paid more money next year if we put it in the program. So guess what happened? Grand Valley water users' water use went up 10% during the year of that program. So when Andy talked earlier that we need sideboards on these programs, you dang betcha, we need this. This ain't the way to do it. We're spending all this money paying farmers not to farm, looking at alternative crops for low water use. Why aren't we spending this money on our infrastructures? We could save so much money improving our infrastructures and conserving water and helping the farmers improve their irrigation systems. That's a long-term fix. This consumptive use program, that's short-term. How long is it going to be for you're going to quit paying us $1,000 an acre not farm, which is cheaper to come in and just buy our ground and dry us up? So that's my take on that.
We appreciate that, and I appreciate the straight talk on it. So it's a welcome perspective. And Paul, I would turn to you to not leave you out here, and welcome you to run through slides and ask what at the state level what tools are able to support producers trying to make changes and adapt.
Okay, thank you. I have one slide, but it's not coming up. There it is. At the Colorado Department of Agriculture, we're aware of the issues of drought and climate change, and so we have an agricultural drought and climate resilience office. And by the way, this slide you won't find on our website because I did some cutting and pasting to put together this slide so I could get everything onto one slide. But in our agriculture drought and climate resilience office, we have a number of programs, and Steve touched on one of them. We have a soil health program. I was reading a book the other evening about the Dust Bowl days and how it was over in southeastern Colorado. And at that time, they had a saying, a mantra that said, "Poor soil makes for poor people." And so in the Colorado Department of Agriculture, we're quite interested in helping people learn about good practices to have good, healthy soil. Now, I don't have time this afternoon to define what healthy soil is, so you define it however you want, low cholesterol, whatever you want. But we have a program that will help producers learn how to improve their soil health. And several of the people here today on this panel have talked about risk. You know, it is often difficult as a farmer to get it right first try. And so it's quite risky and can be quite expensive to try something new, whether it be soil health or a new crop or something like that. And so in the soil health program, we provide both technical assistance and some financial assistance. So if something a producer tries doesn't turn out too well, there's some financial assistance there so that they don't get damaged too badly by a experiment that didn't turn out well or not as well as they would like it to. The other program that we have that's relevant to today's discussion are some grants for climate resiliency, and these grants are available to either prepare for climate events coming up or to recover for them. Again, it's to help decrease the risk of climate change. Those are some of the programs that we work with in this area.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. You touched on a topic that maybe we'll come back to, which is risk. But Hannah, I would ask, how does these studies, these programs, there's a lot of variability out there for crops, soils, irrigation systems. How do you account for that in program design or study design, and what does that look like?
well, I'm not sure exactly what it does look like to do it perfectly, but a few things to just keep in mind as far as developing a program. If you're paying people to conserve water, whether that's through complete fallowing or growing something different that doesn't need as much water, or just some different strategy, I mean, there's a financial transaction there, right? And you have to base that on something. So generally, there's some kind of guess, like Troy kind of pointed out one of the pitfalls of one method of doing it, of just, looking at doing something differently this year compared to what you did last year, and what's the expected difference in water use. But however you do it, it's probably not going to be perfect in terms of what you predict in terms of how much water is going to be saved, and versus how much is actually saved when you tally it up at the end of the season. So an important consideration is who bears the burden of that risk. If it happens to be a rainy summer when you're not irrigating your crops, the satellites are not going to show that you conserved as much water as you plan to. It can turn out differently the other way around. So an important consideration is who bears the risk of, is it going to be whoever's paying for it that, might not get as much conservation as they would otherwise, or is that going to come back to the producer? So that's one of the elements that is important to consider, at least.
Yeah, it seems to be a theme we've heard a little bit more about here, and maybe Troy and Paul, you guys could expand a little bit on a perspective on that risk. Who bears it? Paul touched on a way that the state can help mitigate some of that risk or accommodate for some of it. Maybe to either one of you, can you talk about the risk?
I'll answer. Why do I got to bear the risk? You're the one wanting my water, wanting me to conserve. So I've been making a living, barely, but I've been making a living. Why should I have to risk? I guess it'd be my answer. Now, that being said, the farmer that I am, I gambled a lot of money here last year and planted a low water use crop and stuff. And the reasons I did it really had nothing with conserving water, as I'm looking for the future, because I'm so scared that they're going to come take my water, or take part of my water away from me, and I want to figure out how I can get by with less on my farm if I have to. So that's why I took the gamble. I mean, I'm so scared now. We got, and I'll flat out say it, our own Senator Hickenlooper's about ready to throw us to the wolves of California, trying to negotiate part of our water away. So that's what's scaring me. That's why I took the risk and raised a goofy crop like camelina, and I did prove that it was used way less water than any other crop I've ever seen in this valley. Paul?
I think it's important to understand that farmers, like any other business person, do take risk, and so we're not trying to negate risk completely. We're trying to make it at an acceptable level, or one that a level of risk that is good enough that the farmer wants to try the thing. We have support from various places. The agricultural experiment stations in the area do a lot of testing and trials that we can learn from.
fair point. Thank you for both your input. To change subjects maybe a little bit, Steve, I'd welcome your perspective on what, positive, negative impacts have you seen, maybe surprising things that have come out of some of the program or trials that you've seen. When you hear some of these conversations, what comes to mind?
Well, I did bring some slides, a couple on alternative
It's a big
crops.
button.
So let me just, nope. That's, nope. 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 The red one? Oh, there we go. Okay, let's see, I'll try to do this in order. Let's see, I just want everybody to review those previous slides because there's going to be a test. Okay, so this is my field, and I did plant Kernza. I worked with the Land Institute, and with Perry Cabot, he got the right seed for me. I didn't participate in the program because I'm collecting all kinds of information, but I just wanted to do it my way. So that's what I did. So I didn't plant a monoculture. I went ahead and terminated an alfalfa field and drilled this in, and then also drilled some legumes that you can't see there in the understory, which with the hope that they're going to increase forage production after grain harvest. That's the grain that's been cleaned. As far as I'm concerned, that's pretty close to food grade for bakers, brewers, distillers. Some people might want it cracked for their process. And then after combining, just come in and cut it and bale it for feed. And we've tested the feed value for protein and digestibility. And there's a lot of it, but it's not great. But there's a lot of it. So you can mix it with good hay and feed it that way. But like everybody said, it's great if you can grow it. We knew we could grow it. I think in these West Slope valleys, we can grow almost anything, and we've got good farmers and good soils that can make it happen, and good water. But if there's no market, then that's the difficult thing. And so right now I'm just trying to find a market for the grain. The hay is easy. It's very marketable. But from a wildlife perspective, what I would say, which, it's not something that a farmer, it's not that they don't care about it, it's just that it doesn't factor in as a big deal. It's important to them, but, they've got a big business to run. I'm more of a hobby farmer, weekend warrior type. And what I like about Kernza is we do one pass in the spring to crease the field so we can irrigate it, and we don't combine until early August. So for ground nesting birds, meadowlarks, bobolinks, pheasant, quail, for mule deer to drop their fawns in, there's just essentially no disturbance during that time. And by the time we get equipment in the field, everything's big, it's fledged, it can move out of the way of the equipment. So to me, that's a positive thing from a wildlife perspective. We're not fertilizing. We're still getting, with one cutting, about 2.5 tons to the acre. And we're getting about 300 to 350 pounds of food grade grain per acre, which is just a number until you figure out what the price point is for the people that want to buy it. If they want to pay 50 cents a pound for it, it's not going to do me much good. If they're willing to pay $5 a pound, that's really good. And somewhere in between is pretty good too. So I like a lot of these ideas with incorporating small grains, perennial or annual, into the cropping rotation. I think they're really good for wildlife. But like you were saying, if the market for winter wheat, it's just risk that farmers take on all the time. So I'm lucky in that I can kind of experiment, and if it fails, I have a day job. rains. It's great to see people experimenting with new crops, but then finding that market. And once you can find that market, then that's good. Then you can say, okay, we've got a market for Kernza seed. More farmers can grow that then, and then they can dedicate some of the water that they don't need for their Kernza field on some of their other fields where they do need water, like in an alfalfa or cornfield. So I don't think I answered your question, but I did ramble on.
No, it's good. Yeah, I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Can I say something about markets?
Yes, of course.
You know, I think all four of us have talked about markets. And why do we talk about markets so much? Western Colorado is a rather unique place. We're surrounded by mountains and deserts, which is actually can be a pretty good thing. But as far as selling products and crops, we have to go a long ways to a population center or a place where we can sell the things. And so what that typically translates into is high transportation costs. So we need something that's fairly valuable in order to be able to make a living shipping it out. We do ship bales of alfalfa out, but that's pretty low return for the transportation cost. One of the things that we can probably afford to ship out is livestock because they're quite valuable per pound basis. A pound of beef is worth a lot more than a pound of alfalfa. So I think that's one of the reasons why livestock is such a big crop in western Colorado, just because we can afford to ship it out. You know, if you look at the Midwest, they might have 50,000 acres of soybeans in a 10 or 20 mile radius of themselves and a processing plant. We have a hard time having that kind of options for growing crops and and for processing them locally.
You know, Paul, you're right. That's probably the biggest struggle we face in the Western Slope is getting to market. I mean, just a good example, this year I shipped out 8 rail cars of wheat over to Denver. I got a pretty good price for it, $6.50 a bushel, FOB Denver. Cost me $1.50 a bushel to ship that wheat to Denver. There's your profit. And that's what we got to look at. That's, you know, that's what makes it tough. It's finding a market. There's a market for everything. It's getting it there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, Hannah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, picking up on that theme, that I think this points to maybe a need to expand our thinking about what could be considered investments in drought resiliency and in drought resilient ag. It's not just about the crops in the ground, but it's about the infrastructure to process things and the you know, especially if you can use it locally, then you can save a lot of money if there's some way to do that. But that kind of, you know, what's usually thought of as more, you know, maybe economic development sphere, but that kind of processing and marketing infrastructure can be part of drought resilient investments.
Yeah, it strikes me there's a number of components here that are challenges. The risk, the market viability, the willingness to engage, and that's a theme that I think is really impressive about this group and the programs. The commitment to build a program that has supports built in, that has
that water infiltrate. We've done projects where we've increased forage from 250 pounds per acre to 2,500 pounds per acre on rangeland just by catching moisture and short stopping it, reducing the flow patterns to get the water to sink into the ground. So if you got rangeland and farmland, and it's like, well, I'm cutting back on my water, that's affecting my cropland or hayland production. Maybe you're offsetting that by increasing your forage production, your carrying capacity on your rangelands and forest lands.
Very good. Soil moisture. Paul.
Farmers can be kind of pessimistic when they talk, but farmers are a resilient bunch. They'll be here next year, sitting on this panel if they get invited.
And we hope they'll come. Hannah.
Great. I'm going to say two things. One that I forgot to say earlier, people want to know the details on how these agronomic experiments are going on the crops I mentioned. They need to talk to Perry Cabot. He's also known as one of the drone people. He's doing a lot of work. Perry, where are you? Jump up and down. He's sitting over there. So talk to Perry. He can tell you all about drones and different ways of monitoring conserved consumptive use and how the Kernza and Sandpoint plots are doing today. And the other thing is, I just want to leave you with, from my perspective, like this stuff, I think we've done a really good job of talking about how complicated all this stuff is to figure out up here, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that I don't really think we have a choice. It seems like for the foreseeable future, we're dealing with hotter and drier conditions. So to my mind, we just got to do the work. And it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of money, and we should be clear-eyed about that. But if we want to have thriving communities and flowing rivers, we've just got to roll up our sleeves and do it.
Very good. Troy, bring us home.
I think if we want to preserve agriculture on the western slope, conserve consumptive use programs are not the answer. They're creating more problems than good. They're increasing rent costs. They're increasing water speculation. I already mentioned they've increased water use because they're handled wrong. Let's take that money and let's put them to better uses. We can conserve a lot of water by upgrading our infrastructures and delivery systems and helping the farmers irrigate more efficiently.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you all for your perspectives, for joining me, for sparring back and forth. We really appreciate it. Can we get a round of applause for our panel? Okay, so we're coming up on the end of our programming here. Once again, we just want to say thank you to all of you for making the time to be here, for engaging in these conversations, for hearing our experts. And I'd like to, for some closing remarks, introduce my colleague, our Chief of Strategy, Amy Moyer. Welcome, Amy.
All right, we made it to the end of the day. Hi, everyone. Amy Moyer. I'm the Chief of Strategy here at the Colorado River District. And before we head out for our happy hour, I hope you all can stick around for just a few more minutes. I've been asked to wrap us up to reflect on everything that we've heard of today. And again, first, I want to thank you for being here, for your presence, for your attention, your thoughtful questions, willingness to engage with the ideas and perspectives that have been shared. And specifically, thank you to our audience. We've had a wide audience of agricultural producers, drinking and irrigation water providers, leaders from local and state governments, nonprofit representatives, students, and West Slope residents. Congressman Hurd earlier said that he was impressed and struck by the full room, and that this attendance is a signal to him and other elected leaders on how engaged our community is on water and how integral it is to our way of life here. I want to also thank Colorado Mesa University for hosting us. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to all of our elected leaders for joining. Again, your time, your attention, willingness to engage, that's so central to the success of events like this and to the future of West Slope Water. Like Andy Mueller mentioned this morning, our job is to support
support our communities and water users, but we can't do this work by ourselves. And so I also want to thank our students. I've seen quite a few CMU students filter in and out today. Thank you for being here. You absolutely belong in this room. And it's essential to everyone in this room that we lift up and bring along our future water leaders here on the Western Slope. And over the course of today, we've leaned into the conference theme of Across Divides. We've explored spaces where perspectives don't always align, where there are divides in language, where there are divides in legal theory, where there are divides in practice. We've heard from speakers that water allocation issues are really, really hard, and we're all searching for more certainty, more predictability, but at the end of the day, we must live with what the river provides, which is variable, uncertain, and really difficult to forecast. And we must recognize a hotter and drier future. And while we looked at headlines from the past, we all had a few laughs. We heard stories from the past and reflected on those stories with our lessons learned, with a renewed understanding based on what we learned today. And I'll give a nod to our game show winner, Emily. She said it well. Looking forward, how do we set up our successors for success? Because we'll continue to confront these issues. We heard from presenters who brought both their expertise and their lived experience. And just a quote from the panel we just heard, from Steve earlier, it's risk that farmers take on all of the time. And from Troy, we live within what the river provides every year. And while we can grow a lot of things here on Colorado's Western Slope, we also have to be able to sell it so that we can pass it along to our next sixth generation farmer, the seventh generation farmer. We heard from Steve Pope earlier as an irrigation water provider that from his perspective, we have an obligation to our shareholders to provide a reliable source of water as much as Mother Nature provides us, and we will continue to look for and develop every tool that we can use to manage our systems. And together, we identified both challenges and opportunities ahead. And while none of this will be easy, we heard from Congressman Neguse early this morning that he gave us this call that we can achieve the twin pillars of protecting our interests while investing in collaboration. And so what I take away, and I hope you do too, is that leaning into divides or disconnects, being candid and having open conversations is what leads to progress, partnerships, and durable solutions. And the issues before us, a hotter and drier future, the pressures on the Colorado system, mussels equals bad, aging infrastructure, these all require action, but in a manner that we listen and we learn from each other, we build trust, and we find ways to move forward. And so we open today hearing from CMU's Century Tour and a reflection on their decade-by-decade history. And at the Colorado River District, while we have our own Eras Tour, our mission since 1937 remains unchanged. We work every day for our constituents to protect our thriving communities, our agricultural economies, our healthy rivers, and we're advocates for you. We live out this commitment by getting dollars on the ground through our community funding partnership, by advocating for West Slope water users as these negotiations continue on the Colorado River, and remaining steadfast in our commitment to get the Shoshone water rights preservation effort to the finish line. And so looking ahead, I want to leave you with 3 actions to build on the momentum from today. First, follow up with the contacts that you made with the people at your table, with the presenters here today. It was really hard to bring you all back when we said meet your neighbor this morning. So I hope that you go to the happy hour, find somebody that you haven't had a chance to talk to. The second thing is apply one new idea that you learned from today, whether it's in your personal life, your professional life. Congressman Hurd challenged this room earlier to resist the temptation of staying within your party or staying within your sector, staying within your viewpoint, and work with those across the aisle. And lastly, stay engaged with us here at the Colorado River District. Go to our website and sign up for our news drop, our newsletter. Look for the events and conversations that we hold throughout the year. So finally, again, thank you for being here. Please join us just on the